This might be a bit of a long video. Here is my long-awaited, finally here, deep dive on Visenya Targaryen. This is just my opinion, but I am going to explain why I feel how I feel. Firstly, a bit of detail. Visenya is the eldest of the 3 Targaryen siblings. Her mother was Lady Visenya Targaryen, and her father was Lord Aerion Targaryen, Lord of Dragonstone. Along comes a brother, Aegon, and then a little sister, Rhaenys. Now we know Aegon and Visenya were trained together as children. My personal headcanon is that Visenya picked up a sword first, that she engaged in learning how to hone her skills, and Aegon saw her, and because he followed her around like a little puppy, he picked up a sword as well, and they trained together. Visenya winds up marrying Aegon as per Targaryen tradition, but not before she had already become a dragon rider. Visenya became the rider of Vhagar, one of the dragons that was hatched on Dragonstone. But at some point, Aegon took Rhaenys as his second wife. Now, this is where I want to dispel the notion that Aegon married Visenya out of duty, but he married Rhaenys out of love. I don't think that's true. I think Visenya Targaryen became such a threat to the institutions of Westeros later in her life that the histories depict her in this light. Like, she's second best. She's the other woman. Because history loves nothing more than pitting women against each other. I don't believe that was how it really was, because Aegon and Visenya, they were close as children, and they remained so. They travelled together to mainland Westeros. They visited Old Town, presumably on Dragonback. This was long before the conquest ever happened. As to why he did also marry Rhaenys, I don't have the answer for that. I have a theory. I don't think it was Aegon and Rhaenys with Visenya being on the outside looking in. If anything, I'm more here for a Visenya and Rhaenys situation, with Aegon being on the outs. I'm just putting it out there. What if Aegon married Visenya and Rhaenys so that they could be together? Just saying. That would make sense. So when these siblings were in their sort of mid-20s to late 20s, together they launch the conquest. And yes, I know it is called Aegon's conquest, but it would not have succeeded without Visenya and Rhaenys and their dragons. Visenya's first order of business was having their new neighbours, House Stokeworth, bend the knee. A little fire from Vhagar assured that they did. She oversaw the submission of House Darklyn. Now, I want to read a little passage of how Fire and Blood describes Visenya Targaryen. Yeah, I told you guys this would be a long video. I hope you're comfy. I hope you have snacks, because I'm only about halfway through. Visenya, eldest of the 3 siblings, was as much a warrior as Aegon himself, as comfortable in ringmail as in silk. She carried the Valyrian longsword Dark Sister and was skilled in its use, having trained beside her brother since childhood. Though possessed of the silver gold hair and purple eyes of Valyria, hers was a harsh, austere beauty. Even those who loved her best found Visenya stern, serious, and unforgiving. Some said that she played with poisons and dabbled in dark sorcery. By contrast, the next paragraph, which discusses Rhaenys, is much more flattering. Again, this leans into this myth that Visenya Targaryen was cold and unfeeling. Comparing her beauty to Rhaenys, that's just low-hanging fruit. These were Valyrians. They were all gorgeous. And saying that Visenya is stern, serious, and unforgiving, is that meant to be a bad thing? Fire and Blood makes out like it is, but doesn't the success and the survival, more importantly, of House Targaryen depend on qualities like this? Visenya's not a pushover. Good! It's a conquest, people! Visenya Targaryen played her part. However, Visenya Targaryen was not all fire and blood. She could be diplomatic when she needed to be, and there is proof of this. Case in point, the submission of the Vale. The Arryns thought they were safe up in the Eyrie. They forgot to factor in dragons. Visenya flew into the Eyrie on Vhagar, and when Shara Arryn found Visenya sat with young Ronald Arryn on her knee, she didn't have to say anything. The message was clear. Vhagar is purring in the background. The Arryns bend the knee immediately. Visenya got the Vale to acquiesce, to bend the knee, and there was no bloodshed. She didn't have to resort to using her dragon. She knew when to employ Vhagar and when to use her other strengths. She was both a diplomat but also a warrior. During the famous Field of Fire, the victory where the 3 Targaryens and their 3 dragons all fought together, Visenya was there. She was in amongst it. She took an arrow to the shoulder. She was injured, but she recovered. Enough to see Torrhen Stark become the king who knelt before the dragons. Visenya Targaryen was crucial to the success of the Targaryen conquest, and she tried her damnedest to get Dorne to submit. When Rhaenys and Meraxes were killed in Dorne, Visenya and Aegon, they torched Dorne to a crisp out of sheer pain and grief. I think Visenya loved Rhaenys to her final day and never got over it. So when people describe Visenya as stern, serious, unforgiving, can we blame her? She's had no choice but to be that way because she is a protector for House Targaryen. That's how I see Visenya Targaryen, the ultimate protector of the legacy of her house, of its customs, of its traditions. Where would they be without her? We only have the Kingsguard because of Visenya. She slashed Aegon and was like, oh, these other people around you are not very quick. You need a Kingsguard. Visenya Targaryen was battle-hardened, she was quick, and she was smart. But you don't always hear those words attributed to her. Instead, you get unfeeling, cold, a bitch, basically. I tend to find if history calls you a bitch like they do Visenya, you are probably a threat. It's a tale as old as time, painting a woman out to be strange and weird and untrustworthy. Hence the frequent associations with sorcery and dark magic. She's Valyrian. What else is she going to do in her spare time? One thing she did do was give birth to a son, Maegor. I'll talk about the mother-son dynamic in a separate video. Are you guys still here? Are you still with me? Visenya protected Maegor and she raised him in the image of his father, the Conqueror. And she does this for the continuation of House Targaryen itself. Now, Fire and Blood, again, pinch of salt, they say that 30 years after the conquest, Aegon and Visenya had kind of grown apart. Maybe they did, or maybe Visenya never got over Rhaenys. What if Rhaenys was her one true love and not Aegon, and Aegon was in on this and knew this and tried to protect his sisters? It seems like that is what these children were conditioned to do, to be protectors of themselves and of one another and of House Targaryen as a whole. It's why Visenya advocated Maegor take the throne over Rhaenys and Aegon's son, Aenys. Aenys wasn't a good king. Maegor was no saint, but Visenya knew from the perspective of the continuation of House Targaryen, Maegor was better than Aenys. I don't think it meant that Visenya did not have love for Aenys. I think she did, especially because that is the child of her beloved Rhaenys. Aenys was sick. Visenya was the one to care for him, and he got better under her care. It's moments like that where I don't believe the propaganda about Visenya. Now, Visenya didn't exactly go into a quiet retirement. She was still burning castles and things in her 60s. You know how we say, oh, she should have been in the club? Visenya should have been at the bingo, at the retirement home, but she wasn't. She was on Dragonback burning things. But again, the reason she does this is to secure House Targaryen. It's not for individual power and glory. Visenya lived to crown her only child, Maegor. Not long after, she saw Maegor go through a terrifying coma. She wasn't sure he was going to survive. Visenya had to be tough and serious and unforgiving at those times. But she was also a moderating force with Maegor. She convinced him, let this one slide. She tried to instill in her son, pick and choose your battles. Yeah, don't be a pushover, but don't be a tyrant. And she instilled in her son a deep suspicion of those associated with the faith and the Citadel. In hindsight, Visenya Targaryen was not wrong. Funnily enough, it's the people who are associated with the faith and the Citadel who record Visenya for the histories in Fire and Blood and don't make her out to be particularly favourable. They try and make out that Visenya Targaryen was just the worst. And she wasn't. I believe Fire and Blood deliberately misrepresented Visenya. She was pragmatic because she had to be. Without Visenya, the conquest would not have happened. 44 years after the success of the conquest, Visenya Targaryen dies on Dragonstone. A very, very old lady, especially by Targaryen standards. She did well. She lived a long life. She's painted in a pretty negative light by most of the histories, and I don't think it is warranted. But others see the truth. People like Arya Stark, who idolised Visenya and Rhaenys Targaryen. Just like Arya, I myself see the good in Visenya Targaryen, Queen of the Seven Kingdoms by marriage, but really, just a queen in life. I am an unapologetic Visenya Targaryen defender.